Hello, everybody, and welcome to this awesome panel presented with One Young World. And this is a subject matter of building a better world through sports with inclusion in sports. My name is Melissa Ortiz. I am an Olympian and former professional footballer for the Colombian women's national team, currently based in New York City. And I have the ultimate pleasure of being the moderator for these three great panelists who are quite talented in their sport, in their industry, and in their leadership roles as well. So I'm going to introduce each one. First, we have, of course, Devica Malik, who is a founder of Wheeling Happiness. She was also nominated for Forbes 30 Under 30. She has also been awarded Queen's Young Leader Award by Queen Elizabeth II for the work done by her foundation towards disability advocacy and sport development. Wheeling Happiness has transformed mindsets and the lives of over 10,000 people with disabilities. This year, the foundation has provided meals to 5,000 daily wagers during the lockdown and is continuing to provide long-term support to over 360 underprivileged people with disabilities impacted by COVID-19 lockdown. So, Devica, welcome first and foremost to this brilliant panel. And if you have any welcoming words, please go ahead and do so.
Hello, everyone. It's truly an honor to be amongst you all. You're my heroes in the Paralympic world, in the Olympic world. Because for me, sports was always more a part of my activism and advocacy for disability inclusion. And that's why I really relate to specifically talking about sport for development, because that's the perspective with which we approach sport for people with disabilities in our work with Wheeling Happiness Foundation. One of the reasons why I founded Wheeling Happiness was because I was born with a disability known as hemiplegia. So that impacts my locomotor and neuromuscular functions on the left side of my body. And I'm also caregiver to my mother who has chest pillow paralysis for the last 20 years. So for us, breaking stereotypes around disability was always done through sport in our lives. That was our lifestyle for us. And as time went on, we realized that this is something that many other people with disabilities are relating to. And they are coming forward and asking our family for tips and information on how they can access the world of sport as a person with disability. So we realized that if we make this into a foundation, if we make this into an organization, we can impact many more lives, and we can empower and enable many people with disabilities to reach their potential through sport, as we have been able to do in our lives. So that's what we continue to do to this day. And we are also working very hard within the Commonwealth's atmosphere to bring in sport for development. We've recently set up, I'm one of the founding members of the Commonwealth Youth Network for young people with disabilities to make their voices heard.
Next up, we have Rania Raharja. She is the founder of the Wheelchair Fencing of Singapore and International Olympic Committee Young Leader. She became a young leader for the IOC in 2018. She launched wheelchair fencing in January of 2019 and worked with Fencing Singapore on a 4-year roadmap towards sending a representative in the Paris Paralympics 2024. Fencing Singapore officially became an inclusive national sports association in July of this year. Rania, welcome.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, all. My name is Rania. I'm thrilled to be here. So I was a former Youth Olympian in fencing, represented Singapore in the Youth Olympic Games back in 2010, and had the fortune of actually attending the YOG again in 2018 as sort of a mentor for the younger athletes. I then got the chance to sort of launch a sports initiative through a seed funding from the IOC. And I kind of was really inspired by my time, living in the UK, well, London, where I am at the moment, firsthand when I was training, seeing how athletes with disabilities as well as able-bodied fencers would actually spar side by side. So the way the competition and the trainings were structured was such a way that we would all actually be in the same sort of what we call pools or the competition format. And I truly really like this sort of inclusive environment. I mean, I myself, as a, you may like expat, first moving to a country that seemed really, daunting, sport really helped me integrate not only in just university, but in the community and the society at large. So I was particularly struck by this sort of model. And when this opportunity came about, I just felt that, Singapore sport fencing, having given me so much should, really enable more people to benefit the same way as I did. So I then worked with Fencing Singapore as well as the Singapore Disability Sports Council to launch wheelchair fencing. And I was obviously very thrilled that, this year Fencing Singapore's pledged to become an inclusive sports association. What this means is that we become the official governing body for both persons with disability for wheelchair fencing as well as able-bodied fencers to create a sort of same inclusive environment for the athletes to interact and train together. And I must say, I wasn't, someone who, from the start decided, oh, this is always what I really wanted to do or what I really want to achieve. But I think I simply just really am a person liked sports. This opportunity came about and decided this is one way to actually, be able to give back to something that I really like. And I definitely am very thrilled with the outcome, and hopefully we can achieve our goals and benefit more people.
Steph Reed is a Paralympic long jumper who competes for Great Britain. Although her accent kind of caught me off at first when we first met, but I love this. Steph is a 5-time world record holder, reigning world champion, and triple Paralympic medalist in the long jump and 200-meter sprint. She has an honors degree in biochemistry, and away from the track, she works as a broadcaster, professional speaker, actor, and model. Steph was also a finalist in Celebrity MasterChef 2018. She was born in New Zealand to a Scottish father and an English mother, grew up in Toronto, and moved to Dallas, Texas with her Canadian husband, all before settling back in the UK in 2010. Steph's talent and passion for sport were spotted early. At 12, she was already dreaming of playing rugby on the world stage, but at 15 years old, she was involved in a boating accident, suffering severe propeller lacerations. So her life was saved. Her life was saved at the time, but her foot was then amputated, which is the story that I would love and we would love to hear more about. So Steph, thank you very much for joining us and welcome.
Oh, thanks so much. Rainy, I didn't realize we're practically neighbors. I didn't realize you're in London. I think I was so excited to be part of this panel because sport has been one of the best things in my life, and it's taken me on some of the best journeys. And when I was growing up, I wanted to be a professional athlete. That was all I wanted to do, play rugby. And when I was in the accident and became an amputee, I didn't think that was ever going to be possible. And so I kind of let that dream settle for a little bit. And then a few years later, it came back to life because there were some incredible people who contacted me to let me know, actually, we have this really cool running leg for you, and we want to train you and help you out. And it was just this incredible moment where, my dream was given back to me. And at the moment now, I'm actually training to compete in my 4th Paralympic Games in Tokyo next year. And but beyond that, I want to help people live out the journey that I lived out. And so I've gotten more and more into sport governance. I currently serve as Vice President for UK Athletics. And I also sit on the British Paralympic Association Athlete Commission. And part of the reason for that is because I want to not only keep telling my story and letting people know what's possible in sport, whether you have a disability, whether you're able-bodied, no matter what background you come from. And part of doing that is not just sharing your story, it's setting up the systems and the structure and the governance that allow that to happen. But there's another part to that story, which I realized later in my career. I also work as an ambassador for the leprosy mission, which helps. Leprosy is actually a disease that's completely curable, which is why it's so frustrating, but because it's left, it can lead to things like amputation and lifelong disability. And I felt like I've been telling my story a lot about how, you can still have a great life as an amputee, but there is a big if attached to that. And that if is having a support network. You can have the best attitude in the world, but it will not help you to be independent. You need to have an artificial leg. We need to be providing equipment to make these things possible. So those are my 2 passions at the moment in terms of building a better world through sport.
Just wanted to give a quick shout out that One Young World has partnered with us with Tiempo de Juego on a series of digital events themed around building a better world through sport. So as it just branches into each of what we all do, wanted to give that quick shout out, of course, to Tiempo de Juego out of Colombia. My first question goes to Rania. Rania, why did you want to launch wheelchair fencing? What was the push behind it?
Yeah, so I think it's really about, as I mentioned, my experience of first moving to, to a foreign country, like in the UK, and really just really inspired by my experience seeing how athletes with disabilities as well as able-bodied fencers would train together in this sort of environment, and really having that opportunity to want to, use this funding to do something good and create more impact. I truly felt that Singapore had, in a way, if we made this gap, that our fencing team and scene is really building up, getting very strong, but yet we haven't had a wheelchair, fencing team. And I did some research, found out that some people actually tried to introduce it a couple of years back, but then didn't really have the sort of like momentum or push to really see it through. And then, me being me back then, lots of energy, passion, time, why not? So I sort of decided to focus on that, compared the case study of seeing what Malaysia, our neighbor, managed to do, sending a representative to the Paralympics, having just launched the sport for just a couple of years, really inspired me that I think if we really have the commitment and the drive, that is something that we can do as well. And again, I think above all, as I said, myself having benefited so much from sport, really wanted to be able to share this passion with more people so that they can actually understand what sport means to you as an individual, teaching you the skills like discipline, perseverance, time management, all these things you never otherwise may have developed or discovered about yourself, but also above all, really building a community and the sense of the support network. So fencing obviously gave me lots of really great friends that I still keep in touch with today, even after, leaving the sport. But since then, even joining the community of the young leaders of the IOC, where we inspire each other with the different initiatives that we do across the world, really keep us engaged, especially when sometimes things don't go as planned, spirits are low, especially during a time, in the pandemic. It's really hard to plan things with lots of unforeseen changes. The sort of community and network has really been very important. And I think that's something that sports really has, in a way, brought us all together.
That's the beauty of it. My question now is for Devica. Now, I know that you briefly mentioned in your introduction about launching the Wheeling Happiness Foundation. What was your big motivator behind that briefly? And then I'll ask you a separate question aside from that.
So like I said, living with a disability since birth, and then at a very young age, becoming caregiver to my mother, who was paralyzed below chest. The main driving factor for me throughout my life actually has been, seeing how my mother has transitioned into this life with the acquired disability with such resilience. And so that attribute in her nature always motivated me to kind of understand more about disability, because to me, it was who I was from the day I was born. But I feel like, especially if you have an acquired disability, that sometime in the middle of your life just changes your perspective, changes your lifestyle. One day you are not, and then the next day you are. So that is something very inspiring about disability as well. I personally feel in my experiences that it's a dynamic minority, and that is what is the inspiration behind ensuring that all systems are inclusive, because anybody at any moment of their life can acquire a disability. So why not just have a wholesome, inclusive environment? And we realize how much sports contributes to achieving that. And so we set up this foundation, Wheeling Happiness, because we were anyway personally mentoring, especially women with disabilities, enabling them to kind of get back their sense of self-worth and personhood through sport. So we set up an organization that helps us to do this at a larger scale.
And what you just said, to do it at a larger scale, what can society, government, and organizations do to change things for people with disability in sports?
So mindset is always, I feel, I'm sorry, was that question from me?
Just to build off your answer on Yeah, on a larger scale, what can society or government or organizations do better or do more or just do in general to change things for people with disabilities in sport?
I think one of the things as a system we can do is encourage the shift in mindset uh, to basically view disability as diversity, because we're all different in so many ways that if we understand that disability is just one of the ways in which we differ from each other, and respect that as part of the system of diversity, then our infrastructure will be more inclusive, our mindsets will be more inclusive. And this is something that I always talk about, the chicken and the egg kind of situation. Do we first make the entire infrastructure accessible? Is that an ask we have of our system? Or do we first, as people with disabilities ourselves, kind of start venturing out more and be more visible so that the system understands that we exist and the system needs to be built in a way that it is accessible to us? So at the end of the day, these two things need to happen parallelly.
We look back and at your experiences, at your history, and you have gone through a lot, but have built such a positive outcome. What has been the most challenging moment in your life, and how did you overcome it?
I would say the most challenging moment in my life was actually my comeback and return to sport. And I really love some of the things that Devica was just talking about in terms of focusing on women with disabilities and them regaining their personhood. And for me, it was I was really embarrassed. She's right. Acquiring a disability is a very different experience to one when you're born with it, and you almost have to, you become a different person in some ways. And there's a mourning period. You're mourning for the foot and the opportunities, potential that you lost in the person you were, and you're becoming this new person. And sport was a thing that gave me the confidence. And when I first started going down to the track, I was so embarrassed of my artificial leg. I had two legs. I have a leg that I walk in and I have a leg that I run in. And I would purposely go to the other end of the track to change it because I didn't want people looking at me or looking at my stump and thinking, oh, that's kind of weird. But, 2 years of sport, and, it's a process. It's not this instantaneous thing. But 2 years of sport, I transformed from this person that was embarrassed about my artificial leg to proud of it. And I was like, yes, you should stare at it. I mean, it's amazing. I would stare at it too. And it just, it just taught me that life is going to be different and there will be challenges, but I can overcome them. And that's true for everybody in life. You don't need to have a disability. And it's something that we should all learn to do in all areas of our life. And sport is this great training ground, whether you want to do it recreationally, whether you want to do it professionally. It's just this safe area to connect with people and learn how to deal with failure, learn how to deal with wins, and do both of them really gracefully.
Personally, I've gone through injuries, okay? Just injuries, and I tore my Achilles as well. And personally, it was one of the hardest comebacks ever. And like you had mentioned, comebacks, right? The return to sport, or the return just to kind of get back to what was or is perhaps normal. You're a 3-time Paralympian. So what is it that you did that really motivated you to get to that first Paralympics? So for instance, for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to set this date. They're like small goals, but at the end, it was like the big goal. And then I had my family as a motivating factor. What was it for you?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think for me, underlying everything was just this deep passion and love for sport. And especially as a female, it was just this arena where it was okay to go and be, competitive and be aggressive and kind of explore, and be strong and kind of explore these areas that sometimes society doesn't allow us to have as identities. And you can go into the sports arena and you can just reclaim them. But I think the other thing that was a huge motivating factor was, there's a lot of talk at the moment about resilience and failure and how you deal with it. And for me, at 15, this was a really serious accident. I was very aware at moments throughout it, I might not survive it. And then coming through and thinking, oh, this is amazing, I've survived. And then being told, yes, but now you're an amputee, and just kind of the highs and the lows. People talk about rock bottom, and that was probably me where that was. Yes, I'm very smiling and positive now, but, don't get me, it wasn't like that 20 years ago. But the thing I think that I've learned, and I continue to learn throughout my life, is actually, even though it's not fun to be at rock bottom, it's an incredibly powerful place to be. And it's a place that makes me dangerous because I have nothing to lose then. You almost get backed into this corner where suddenly what comes out is you are just wild and untamed, and you can just go for it and you're free. And that's what I felt like going to those Paralympic Games. I thought, I've experienced in some ways the worst. I have nothing to lose, and I'm just going to go out and enjoy this. And in many ways, I'm so thankful for that lesson and how it's translated to other parts of my life.
Absolutely love it, and super inspiring. And as they say, when you reach rock bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. So that's something that I once remembered in my year-long recovery as well. Awesome. And we have some comments here as well. And I just wanted to say hi to everyone who is commenting. I see from Uganda, from Kenya, Barcelona, Colombia. So hello to everybody. Next question is back to Rainia. How has your experience been since your launch, and what have you learned, or what advice would you give to other people thinking about doing an initiative like the one that you started?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. As I mentioned, when I first decided to launch this project, it wasn't like something I really thought I should do, but rather an opportunity came about, and I thought, what a good chance to really do something and give back to the sport society. And since actually doing this initiative, I've learned a great deal about myself, just in terms of how to get things done. Managing a team, as well as really utilizing your network and working with other people, because there's only so much you as like an individual can do. So for myself, I'm incredibly grateful for obviously the partnership and the supports of the great federations in Singapore, like the Singapore Sports Council, as well as obviously Fencing Singapore. I think I really needed to rely on a lot of their expertise. So myself, having been an able-bodied fencer and had limited, obviously knowledge sometimes about the sport, I think it was really important to actually partner with people who really kind of understood what is the best way to actually achieve this sort of impact. So that's one thing I really realized in terms of, the partnership and the network. In terms of, I guess, advice about giving to other people, I'd say that nothing should really stop you from doing that. I've heard things from people saying like, oh, but what if I don't have the time? I don't have the expertise. I have the knowledge, this and that. It's like, well, I had really nothing to begin with. I kind of went into this, and then you learn a lot of things on the way. You learn how to fix things. You learn what's the best way to get things done. And in fact, from the first year I started to do the project up till today, I've learned so much more. The first year was, how can we gain awareness? How can we spread the message? How can we get more people involved? And the first time we did the launch, I probably spent months, trying to market the event and hoping, oh, I'm going to have this great bang. I want like 40, 50 people to turn up. It's going to be fantastic. And then the day that and the time came and that one person turned up, and I started getting very worried, saying, I have this like 8 volunteers there. I can't have more volunteers than participants. And then we started reaching out and realizing some people saying, I'm stuck in traffic. Some people saying, oh, it's really difficult because of mobility issues for me to get there. And then it's more of like, well, how can we help you to make this easier? So it's really about understanding, the challenges. In the end, we got managed team of slightly, more than 10. We had a great workshop. Many people were so like excited about finding this community and wanting to, continue. And I think it was this sort of experience that made me obviously, learn a lot more about logistical planning in advance for the next event, but also like in keeping motivated, seeing how this kind of impact can give to people. And I thought it was also great that we obviously held that in the same hall, that the same day was held a fencing competition for the athletes. And I must say, like, my group of people, wheelchair fencers, actually were the ones screaming the hardest, like really enjoying ourselves and creating the most noise. So yeah, I want to see more of that. So yeah, my advice to people is just do it. You get the support, the help you need. Don't be afraid to reach out, but just take that first step.
Question is for Devica. Now, it's kind of 2 questions in one, because we have actually a question from Farida Idris who in the comments section, and it kind of goes in line with the question that I had prepared, or that is prepared. How can you use your organization to collaborate with African countries where people living with disabilities are seen as inferior?
I understand the challenge there because I feel that a lot of the experiences that we have with disability in the Indian subcontinent is something that is reflected a lot in many of the African countries as well. I know that people with disabilities everywhere face that set of challenges, but in some countries, there actually happen to be religious connotations around this, where people go to the extent of saying things like, you must have done something bad in your previous birth, for which in this birth this is your punishment. So that just denotes the ableist, internalized ableism around the kind of status we give to disability in the world. We view it as a lesser human state of being. So of course, that is why when we talk about sport for development, because sport is one such tool which enables you to showcase your abilities in a very visual and a very physical manner, especially for people with physical disabilities who are presumed to be weak because they are missing a limb or mobility in terms of the ability to walk. So when these people are seen as competing in sport or participating in sport, doing something very physically active, so that helps in changing and shaping the perceptions of the society around, and also it gives people with disabilities ourselves a lot of self-esteem and new perspective on how we see ourselves, first of all, and how we want society to see us. So we do a lot of collaborations within India and internationally. Like I said, I am one of the founding members of a network called the Commonwealth Children and Youth Disability Network. So I do invite people from all over the continents, all the countries, to become a part of this network, and that makes us easier to collaborate, especially disabled people organizations, to all collaborate across the globe and come up with various programs and see where our similarities lie and what it is that we can take from each other's programs and implement across the globe.
Perception of thoughts of people with disability in sports?
Sorry, I missed.
Yep, I'll repeat it. Yep. So through your collaborations that you had mentioned, have you seen an actual change of perception of thoughts of people with disability in sports?
Absolutely. If I were to give you a very small anecdotal example, there's a lady who came to us because she heard of my mother's story in sport, and she was a wheelchair user as well. So she identified, and the reason why she came to us is because she had a progressive disability. So finally, when she got on a wheelchair, at that point of time, her her husband, basically her entire family on the in-laws side, they just disowned her, and she was sent back to her parents' house, which is something that's really frowned upon in society. So she came to us looking for, feeling like she has an identity again. She contributes something to the household, just to have that feeling of standing on her own. So she started exploring sport, and eventually her journey in the last 5 years with us has been such that in 2018 she was actually part of the team that went to the Asian Para Games. Similarly, there are quite a few people with disabilities who use sports recreationally through our foundation. But in the bargain, what that does is that it gives a glimpse to prospective employers who may have some conscious or unconscious biases around hiring people with disabilities. It makes them see a different side of that person, and it makes them have that faith that yes, these are employable people who will live up to what they are committing to, and they will deliver.
Thank you. And the next question is for Steph. To date, what do you think is the biggest barrier for people with disabilities to participate in sport?
I think there's a lot of things, and it's a multifaceted approach. And again, just the things that Rani and Devica are doing, I'm just sitting here thinking, yes, this is so awesome, especially as someone who has lived through programs like these and benefited so much. I think one of the biggest issues is it's really challenging as a person with a disability to envision yourself doing something when you don't see it in the media, you don't see other people like you. It's so much easier to be something and do something when you can see it, and we just need to shout out more about these role models. I think we're just so narrow still in terms of media, in terms of the kind of things and qualities that we celebrate. And I'm encouraged because, like Davica, I see these things changing. And actually, I'm just going to share a little anecdote as well. And I know that they're changing. I was in a grocery store a few years ago, and I have excellent hearing, and I could hear this conversation going on behind me. And it was a little girl about 5 with her mum, and I was wearing shorts. I just come from the gym, and this mum said to her little girl, "Don't stare, sweetie. She has a poorly leg." And I kind of just listened to what this young girl was going to say, and she thought for a moment, and then she said, "No, she doesn't. She has a robot leg." And just carried on. And I just thought, amazing. She doesn't feel sorry for me. She doesn't see me as other than. She just sees me as me with a cool leg. And I thought, that's great. But the other barrier that we have to address and we cannot ignore is funding. The reality is it is simply more expensive to live life with a disability. The world has been largely designed for people with one type of mobility. And that causes extra expenses. As Rani was saying, it makes it difficult for people to travel to events. And we need to account for this and understand it, and understand also that equality doesn't always mean the same. People with disabilities will need specific types of help and specific investments in different areas. And if we are really going to commit as a society to changing this, we have to acknowledge that. And the reality is that things like the ability to move around, I think in many ways, disability and mobility can be seen as a spectrum. And at any point in our life, any one of us can shift on that spectrum. And that's why it matters to all of us. In the London Underground, the tube doesn't just need to be accessible because people are in wheelchairs. What about mums with wheelchairs? What about people coming from Heathrow with huge bags? What about the business exec who's happened to twist his ankle? All of these people need to have lifelong secure mobility. This is why we should all care about it.
Right now during COVID times, but subways, it's a massive challenge to go downstairs when they can't go downstairs. So what does it mean? They have to go to another subway station to take that same train line, which is absolutely, ridiculous, to say it lightly. To kind of build on that, because I do see some comments just about the money factor that you mentioned. Sarah says, being a physiotherapist in Pakistan, I've noticed that economical background matters a lot, which also leads to Santiago Pisano saying, what policies can be implemented in order to promote sports in disabled communities worldwide? And I think this is going to be a question actually for the three of you. Steph, if you want to start first in answering that, I'll repeat the question. What policies can be implemented in order to promote sports in disabled communities worldwide?
So I'm actually going to steal a line from one of our British Paralympic head coaches in athletics. He came in before London 2012 with the policy, the same. We were going to have access on the disability, on the athletics disability program as the able-bodied, and that mattered. And in terms of policies in sport, I think it's just, that's it. It's the same. Everyone comes and we're going to find a way. And I definitely appreciate the fact that different economic backgrounds definitely play a part. But the one thing that I would say is sport matters even more for people with disabilities, because the reality is having a disability automatically makes you have to be an athlete. Try being a person in a wheelchair, getting up and down a curb. If you are going to use an artificial leg, you are going to have more balance and more agility than the average person. If you want to be mobile for life with a disability, and you want to be able to do things like, if you're in a wheelchair, transfer into your car, you better have a pretty strong upper body. And it is through sport that we are going to give people lifelong independence. And it is actually in the economic benefit of all governments to support people with disabilities and all people in this way.
So if I may just add on to what Steph said, I think apart from, people recognizing the benefits, to me, the two main things would be awareness and access. So for one is for people to be aware of, where can they actually, do sports? How can they do it? So it's really the sort of like marketing efforts. A lot of people are simply unaware, so they just don't know. The second bit, when I mean access, is in terms of like the venues, right? We want everything to be, said accessible so people can actually get around. Is it close to the train stations, as well as how convenient is it, and economically, is there a way to actually make this model sort of sustainable? So I think really the two things, that's what I've been really focusing on in my project. I think some of the initiatives that we did, such as Inclusive Sports Festival, may not just necessarily target on persons with disabilities, but actually also the able-bodied population. The whole idea is really to foster this sort of inclusivity, as well as the awareness and understanding, which I think sometimes we're really lacking.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry, that happens sometimes. So yeah, I was saying in terms of policy, and I very closely understand the concern raised here around policies as well as the need for economic resources, is because especially in India, I can confidently say that we have a lot of policies which are made in a way that they enable people with disabilities to garner, first of all, special identification which they need to gain access to all their reasonable accommodations, as well as the sport policy, like was being said earlier, it's same now finally in India for the Olympics and Paralympics, especially since Rio Olympics. And the issue still lies in implementation, because the issue still lies in ensuring, especially in a country as diverse economically and culturally like India, ensuring that that information is dissipated and it reaches people at the grassroots who need it the most. So one of the initiatives that we do through our foundation as well is that we go into small districts and then we gather many people with disabilities and their caregivers from within the villages there and talk to them, educate them about what are the various policies that the government has which makes their life as people with disabilities more productive, and how they can access the facilities that these policies provide. And here, economic background also plays a role, because we've met people with disabilities who have not stepped out of the four walls of their house for over a decade because they could not afford a basic wheelchair, which costs around 60 up to 60 pounds even. And we provide that accessibility mobility device to them, and it transforms their life completely because they're able to experience the world so much more holistically now. So definitely the issue of implementation is there, and the issue of economic well-being is there, but I feel like that is why organizations like ours exist, because we understand the power of sport and we are enabling people to harness it in their lives.
What is your best tip for people with disabilities who often have a negative experience with physical activity due to the interaction with others? For instance, whether they're a young child at school or in their prospective sport?
I think, like the reality is when you stand out, it's always going to be hard. And I would never dress it up for someone. I would be realistic. You're going to have to learn how to handle this and accept it. And I think eventually just enjoy what it means to stand out and be the first to do something and be the first person to change minds and to change perceptions. But I think also one of the things that I've been really lucky throughout my life in that I can't say that I've experienced a lot of bullying. But what I have noticed is when people do stare, and I've approached them, it's never been out of a heart that's malicious. It's been curiosity, and actually they're just really impressed, and they just don't know how to interact or how to ask questions. And so I think that's always been encouraging. Often it's just that people find it exciting, but if they haven't been around disability, they can be a little bit awkward. So just give them a little bit of forgiveness and start the conversation.
Great. Does someone want to build on that?
I just wanted to say it goes back to the whole awareness and educational piece.
Lovely. And while you're there, actually a question for you. What was your experience like at One Year World London 2019? And how was attending the event to help you with your project and in the direction that you took it?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of attending the One Young World Summit last year in London. Also, it was the 10th year anniversary. That was really fantastic. And in fact, we made one of the large events right before COVID. So now it's really a real treat to think about it. I was very inspired by all the speakers present, the kind of scale, the quality. But I think more importantly, it's really meeting kind of a group of like-minded people across different backgrounds. But equally, I think everyone just had a passion to create something that will be better for the world. It could be sports, could be other means. But I think it's this sort of diversity of thought, as well as the quality of people that met, that really made me more, I think, passionate about what I'm doing, but equally taught me how to think a bit more creatively or outside the box in terms of how can I deliver more impact. So then the way I decided to do was, well, I could organize that many amount of, let's say inclusive workshops or, fencing events, but, not being based in Singapore and not necessarily having the right resources or expertise myself. Really, the best way to drive this forward is partnering with the organization and the people who have the means and the capabilities of doing so. And so that's the direction I decided to take for my projects. Obviously work with the association on this kind of 4-year roadmap on how can we, possibly, hopefully, fingers crossed, send someone to the games. But if not otherwise, the real impact, I think, is in really building community. So people wanting to continue the sport. I think one real mind shift, set shift I also had was initially when I started this project, I was all about, I really want to change, impact so many people. And then obviously I started realizing actually it's really not the numbers, right? Imagine if you had 100 people turn up the first event and you had 2 the next. That, in fact, I think it's more of a failure than having 2 people for the first one and the 2 really wanting to come every week thereafter. So I think the real impact really isn't in the numbers, but rather the quality. And that's what we really chose to follow on. And for me, the real success of the project, sending a representative Paralympic Games, obviously that's great, an inspirational story. But the truth is you can impact or transform one person's life to make that person potentially, someone who wouldn't want to leave their house because of lack of confidence, someone who was shy, to actually just being able to try something new, like it, just that difference, I think to me will be a great success for my project. And that's really what I'm aiming for. So above all, I think, really attending the summit broadened my views, met great people, allowed me to think a bit differently about my project, but really enabling me to build up this network. Even just today being on this event, meeting all these really great inspirational speakers that I really hope we have the chance to, again, catch up separately. It's just, another opportunity to get us all engaged in our cause. So.
If I can just say a word about One Young World, another thing I truly appreciate is that just as a summit, this program is trying really proactively to be more inclusive and be more integrated to all the delegates, that potential delegates and the delegates that we have. And I know this because after the 2018 summit that I attended, we were asked our feedback, a group of us as people with disabilities attending the summit, around the accessibility of the summit venues itself, of the modes in which all the sessions were delivered. And as a result of that, we actually ended up forming an advisory group for accessibility for the forthcoming One Young World Summits. So it also, when we talk about systemic change, this is an example that the system itself, the stakeholders of the system itself, take it upon themselves proactively to be a more inclusive space.
It's inspiring. Briefly, because I know that this panel ends within the next minute or two, but what is something on a personal level maybe that other athletes that are able-bodied can do, or perhaps big brands such as your Nike, Adidas, etc.? What can they do, or what can we do to help this? I I guess, become more inclusive in this matter? And this could be answered by any of you. I know it's cutting it close to our ending.
I'll jump in really quickly and just say, again, I think one of the best things you can do is visibility. And it's not because, you feel sorry for us and want to help us. It's because we're going to make your business better. One, consider the number of people in the world that have disabilities, and these people all have buying and purchasing power. They want to see themselves reflected in media, but also because it's just cool. We were so sick of seeing the same things, and we want to see the different ways that people have found to be successful. Like, it is in your interest to just start showcasing the amazing diversity we have in the sporting world.
Beautiful. Brilliant. Thank you all so much, Steph, Rania, and Devica. It has been actually a great pleasure, not only to meet you three, but also to discuss something that personally it's not something that is normally discussed. And as an athlete myself, it's very eye-opening. And it's something that I definitely want to involve more in my life, but also in the projects that I'm doing with my fellow teammates and athletes on the national team. So thank you all again so much for your time. And for those of you watching, we really appreciate you joining in, tuning in, and also engaging in this conversation through your comments. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.